The Monk and the Gun is a Bhutanese drama film. It deals with the country's transition to democracy from monarchy in modern times. I believe it said 2006. This is the same director, if this rings a bell, as Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, which I believe was up for Best International Feature a few years ago. So I do think it's kind of interesting that suddenly one Bhutanese director has managed to get a little bit of international attention with a couple of his features. I think that's awesome. It's cool to be able to just get an insight into a different country. Of course, I'm going to be talking about this from an American perspective. I'm American. It does give some commentary on general global state of things, probably some more direct comment on America specifically as a representative of the outside world, more or less. But regardless, let's just jump right into it because I think this is one of the more likable movies I saw this year, which I think is kind of impressive in a sense because, at the heart of it is some political criticism and trying to put a little bit of distance between the cool guys, the society and structure that is very common in, more developed countries, and saying that, perhaps tradition still has its place, perhaps our way of life is still what we want. Perhaps there may be some benefits to what the outside world provides, but is there more benefit to what we already have? And I think it's impressive that it manages to call into question just how good the status quo is for other countries, while not feeling vicious, while not feeling like it's attacking anyone else. This feels like a movie that's saying, we have something that works. Is what's coming in any better? And, part of why that works so well is because the people as depicted in the film are just so likable. It's such a simple, romantic kind of idea with, people just kind of focusing on what's important, so to speak. The simple trappings of life for them. But yeah, anyway. I think nothing feels like a really personal attack when you're watching the movie, at least not to me. Movies are, of course, allowed to make personal attacks. You can say whatever you want. But this is a movie that's very optimistic, a movie that is very affectionate towards the country of Bhutan. It's clear that a director loves his country, I think. So, to me, it would come off kind of weird if it was very attacking of other countries. But I think instead, the way it's framed is... I didn't really have a piece that fit together for this next part, so I'm just going to re-record it real quick. It would be ill-fitting because there's this tone of optimism and pride throughout for the country. And the movie does not condemn progress. It is not against new things coming in. It's just wary. It's just worried about the influences and some of the negative behavior. And some of the negative behaviors that can come from, certain political discourses and whatnot. But it would be ill-fitting to just outright condemn all these things, because the ultimate conclusion is optimistic. Ultimately, the director does believe in the people of Bhutan to be able to make these changes, to continue to survive and thrive and become something new. So I'm really glad it's not a toxic sort of tone, because this is the right match. The optimism fits with the fun, fits with the love for the people, and the acceptance of progression. So, of course, Bhutan has their own culture, their own way of doing things. And I think the movie manages to say pretty delicately that it likes its way of doing things. That the global, the American way of doing things is maybe not desirable for everyone, not desirable for them. There's an innocence there, I think, and a pride in the country, perhaps would be a better way to put it, that I think is really admirable. Being able to be proud of the way your people are, the way they live their lives, I think is really wonderful to be able to have. And I think even beyond that, the sort of environment, the landscapes, lend a certain maybe familiarity, relatability, a certain hominess to the setting. There's certainly plenty of that in, America. I've certainly driven through parts of the country that were, probably not as nice looking as some of the locations here. But nonetheless, like the sparse country roads, the farms, everything like that, This is not necessarily an unfamiliar sight to, I think, a lot of people outside of the country who are watching this movie. So there's like a combination of recognizable American or global traits combined with a simple, enviable confidence and contentment with the life that the Bhutanese people have. And I think just having that combination of traits is just hard not to like because they don't want anything crazy. They just want to be happy. It's not complicated. And it's hard not to get on board with that. Part of me wonders a little bit, like, am I just focusing on the America versus Bhutan commentary because, like, I'm just in America already. That's hard for me to look past. But at the same time, I do think it's fairly clear the movie is concerned with America specifically as a type of representative of what democracy or a form of democracy might look like. But I do think it's well warranted. From the very beginning, I think, the very first shot is kind of like amber waves of grain as the monk walks through the field, you know. Amber waves of grain, of course, being from like America the Beautiful. And at least to me, that evokes something American. And I think it's backed up by more American, you know, references, characters, stuff like that throughout. The opening shot is kind of establishing like a traditional figure, the monk, a very important figure in terms of like reverence, I think. Yeah, we see people throughout having respect for the monks and the Lama as well, you know, giving up their seat, giving them rides, respecting what they have to offer. So we have, you know, like this traditionally impactful figure kind of walking through the amber waves of grain of globalism generally, perhaps America more specifically, kind of coming into their country. At the end of the film, there's like a mirroring shot, which is, you know, on the poster itself, the monk doing the same action, carrying that barrel or whatever the contents of it was, through the field of flowers instead of the field of grains, which to me feels like transition from just encroaching foreign influences to something uniquely Bhutan, after the efforts of the Lama to kind of, you know, advocate for tradition plus progress. So in addition to an initial American reference there, I think, we also, of course, have the central character who is an American, Ron. And it's not just that, but it's also his Americanness that kind of comes along with him in terms of just kind of like trying to throw around money, get people to do things by paying them, and kind of finding out in pure shock that perhaps the people don't have the same priorities as him. Perhaps they're okay with not just piling up excess. Perhaps they don't need 10 guns. Perhaps they only want exactly what they need. Even the gun itself, as it mentions, is an American Civil War relic. And the through line of guns, you know, as the main symbol for violence, strife, and death, being kind of like sacrificed in the hopes that Bhutan doesn't go down that same path. And then there's also plenty of shots of like things like Coke, Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace, of course, not primarily American, I suppose. At the very least, it's an international production, co-production. So that's certainly more on the global side than specifically America, but part of the foreign influence coming in alongside democracy. The depiction of democracy is not without conflict, and this is kind of part of the way that Bhutan, or maybe more generally the director, looks at the world and sees the state of things. Because while it's certainly true, it's a blessing to be able to vote and to have some kind of say in the direction the government and the country take. The mother of the family asks, understandably at some point, they don't have to fight for this right. Do they need it? The contentment of the Bhutan people in the film extends to politics, which in itself is kind of culture shock. Because when was the last time anyone in America was content with the state of the country politically? Feels like it's been a while. I don't know if it's been in my lifetime. And again, that just goes back, I think, to the director seeing the state of the world, seeing the disarray, the antagonism, the lack of goodwill towards people on the opposite side of the aisle. And he is addressing that kind of lightheartedly, again, which is admirable. It doesn't feel like he is directly hitting out at people. You know, specifically in the mock election, the guy who's kind of officiating it, specifically says like, oh, say it like you hate the other people, but don't hit them or anything. And, you know, that is a line of like, this is what someone sees when they look on the state of, global political discourse. And it's hard not to wonder, maybe our way was better without this. And he's worried that, even though they have it in them to persevere, are they going to be able to become better? Are they going to be able to push past the obvious pitfalls? I love the message of hope in it. Like I said earlier, he loves his country. It seems he's confident that they can pull through, that they can make something better through these changes. He is optimistic. At the end, of course, the Lama, alongside the monk, of course, kind of the representative of the old guard, the representative of the traditional side of Bhutan, blessing the forward progress, blessing the modernization. This is not a film that's anti-progression. It's not a film that's anti-modern society. It's a film that recognizes the importance of tradition. It's a film that recognizes what the country has. But the new doesn't have to overwhelm the old. And I think the way it's depicted with the Lama kind of, passing on his blessing to the new order is really lovely. It's very representative of that, epilogue message about, the peaceful transition of power. I think it's just awesome to be able to see the director's love for the country shine through and his respect for the people. And just the way he manages to communicate all that charitably in a fun way is really wonderful. I think he does such a good job balancing all the aspects of the film. So I really hope he's able to continue making films, especially if they're, centered on his home country, because I love being able to see little perspectives and peeks into other countries I might not otherwise know anything about. Absolutely check this out if you get a chance. Highly recommend.